Such, these ties are such good-looking ties, very nicely designed.
Yeah, they're all, every unit, every formation has their tie.
Hmm.
It, one of the methods of getting officers and men,
Yeah.
because the men also wear the tie during when they're wearing civil dress,
Okay.
to give them a sense of belonging
Hmm.
to the unit or formation to which they belong.
Right. But they're very
And
nicely
this is very
designed.
important.
They're designed very nicely.
Yeah. No, not only that, what happens is that, at every aspect of battle,
Hmm.
since people are facing death and destruction,
Right.
every effort is made to give them loyalty to their colleagues, to the unit,
Right.
to the formation. Nobody dies for his country, everybody dies for his friends and relatives in the unit itself, you see. And to keep to keep his izzat, the honor, because his reputation is so important. People in his village and people, his wives, his families must all appreciate a person of valor and staunch courage. Though he may not have much courage, but he has to show that. It's not that people don't feel fearful, but that they have to learn to control the fear and do their duty. So that's it. Why this is one of the facets of togetherness. I was talking about military operation directorate. Now, I must say that though commanding a formation or a unit is a delightful command, but when you think of the brains behind the functioning of the military, you have to think of army headquarters and the instructions that come from there. And there are various departments in the army headquarters, large number of departments, because it's a massive force. It's over a million, 1.3 million men. And there is no organization in the country or the world for that matter which compares with the administration and morale and the method of functioning of this mighty force. So the brains here is in the army headquarters. We call it the madhouse. Nobody understands how they function. But nonetheless, the military operation directorate is the nuts and bolts of military operations and planning. They're in contact with naturally their boss is the vice chief of army staff, but they're in deep contact with the army chief. They're in contact with the Navy and Air Force chiefs and similar organizations in the Navy and Air Force. Plus, they're in deep contact with the Ministry of Defense and the Foreign Ministry. So the staff officers here have to learn how to get on with the people of vastly different upbringing and training, especially amongst the civilians. I must say something about the bureaucracy here because military operations directly deals with the Joint Secretary G of the Ministry of Defense. Now, Joint Secretary G is the is the army deals with the army. There's a similar man dealing with the Air Force, similar man dealing with the Navy. They all report to the Defense Secretary. Now, according to Government of India Book of Rules, which only the bureaucracy follows, we don't even know that it exists. The responsibility for the defense of India is that of the Defense Secretary, not the minister, not the military, but the Defense Secretary. Now, he's a bureaucrat who comes up. Now, mark you, bureaucrats are very clever and very sharp. They know how to play games. They know how to keep everybody at arm's length, including the politician. And they go ahead and do all the duties that they have to do without getting caught for having done something for which they can be blamed. It's a marvelous organization if you come to think of it. They give orders, sometimes the most dastardly, useless orders, but they take no responsibility for those orders. So if you're one of those poor people who get an order from the ministry to do X, Y, Z, even though you can see right from the start that it's a useless order to fail, But if it fails, you have to blame and not the bureaucrat who gave you the orders. So it's authority with no responsibility. I think we need to change that somewhat. I don't know if it's happening, but I think slowly, we are getting there. Politicians have to take much more responsibility about what happens in their ministries instead of waiting. I must have told you last time when I was commanding the division, Gyani Zail Singh had visited the president. And when I asked him that the bureaucrats don't function, he said, how can they function? I said, your politicians don't function. They can't function, he says. He says, because they've got only two hands and one is holding his pagadi. कि बेइज्जती ना हो जाए, dishonored, and just holding on to his chair in case somebody just drags the chair away from under him. It's how can they work? Anyway, we have to live with that, and this is one of the facets of democracy. Uh, no system of governance is very good, according to me. But out of the systems that exist, whether it's communism or dictatorship or democracy or left of some center or right of center, whatever it is, I think the democracy is probably one of the better methods of running a country. It takes time to make a decision, lot of arguments and lot of disagreements, but in the long run, we seem to succeed both in development and in battle. Now, coming back to MO Directorate, it's the hub of military operational thinking. 1962 war, I explained to you earlier when I was doing staff college, how we all drank a toast to Mao Zedong and to Chow En-lai for having woken India up. But at that stage, the politician and the bureaucrat thought that the generals were of no consequence. They only wanted to take over the country, like happened in all African and other South Asian states. Therefore, they have to be kept down, not be given any responsibility for making overall national plans for defense or security, internal security, external security. 1962 war took place because of the idiocy of the orders that were given by the government. And for that matter, the idiocy of the generals who obeyed those orders. Now, many of these generals were King's commissioned officers. There, the politician is much more experienced. I've explained this to you earlier. The politicians are more experienced because there's not a family in England or America, for that matter, whose near ones or dear ones haven't actually participated in some war or the other. So they have a respect for the uniform and an understanding of the operational necessities for political control. And therefore, they are judged to be wise enough to be implicitly obeyed because they are responsible to the people for the defense of the land. And if they fail, they are the ones responsible. So naturally, the military in these Western nations have to fully accept the orders that come from their political leaders. In a new country like India, for instance, the political leadership is not mature enough to understand this. It'll get there in the course of time. Point is that they're playing political games to retain the seat, as one might say, to retain their position in the elections. And they don't give any interest to what the military orders are doing, making sure that nobody gets out of control and making sure that nobody becomes too strong. After the 62 war, because of the disaster that India faced and the fact that the government nearly fell and the defense minister had to be sacked, and I think Jawaharlal Nehru, the then prime minister, a year or two later, died a very unhappy man because all his theories of Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai came to naught. They realized that you've got to listen to the military mind if you want to have proper security for the country. And if you don't have security in the country, then development is not possible. So security is essential. Security from external problems as well as from internal problems. Of course, we have the police for internal problems, but the brains and the training of the military is such that it can advise the government very effective as to what is required to be done. And many times they do it on their own, but the hand has to be held. So MO Directorate came into its own after the 1962 war because of this failure. Suddenly people realized that what these jokers were saying in the military operations directorate have to be listened. So by the time I reached there, if we said anything after due consideration, everybody in government sat up and took notice. So it was an interesting period of time. I spent about 2 years with them. And I think it was a great development for myself to having experienced disappointment. Now, I'll tell you a few things that happened here which are of interest. Firstly, there was a lot of operational problems in Kashmir vis-a-vis Pakistan. China at that time was not much of a threat. They were building up. And at that time, whoever the Chinese president was, they were not offensively oriented. Mao Zedong was dead. So was Chow Enlai. So we felt that the danger from that side was not that much. Secondly, the development in Tibet had not fully taken place, but takes time. And so there was the only threat that India really faced was terrorism from Pakistan and Pakistanis. So we were dealing with that. And in the military operations, you have one section dealing only with physical operations. There's a major general in charge, there's a person called Major General Nayyar, Tabi Nayyar, good friend of mine from the Signal Corps, but he transferred to the paratroops and a very good commander. And he had commanded a division in Nagaland. And after that, he came to MO Directorate and he was in charge of the operations as a major general. Under him, he had a few brigadiers, etc., who were dealing with the actual operations in Western India, Eastern India, Northern India, wherever. The other major general was myself, which was dealing with every other aspect of military operations. This was dealing with the Army, Navy, and the Defense Ministry and Foreign Ministry if necessary, planning at the national level, and also the question of the finances, where they to come from, the type of maps that are required, the type of organizations that are required to be enhanced or reduced for that matter. And I had a number of sections. Also, this particular appointment also was in charge of the documentation of the military and the papers that we held in our control, which were there from the British states. It had papers of World War I, World War II, and also the Kashmir operations, everything. The planning papers, etc. They were kept in files where the paper was deteriorating slowly. You know how it is, how long to keep paper and documents in files. So the first thing I thought I had to do was to maintain a better record of everything, because these records are so interesting since the operational methods and techniques used in World War I, World War II, in between the various operations fought while the British were in India, and the reasons why they were done, they're all available here. So much of these documents were sent into the archive, the government archives, where they look after the documents very carefully. But there's certain top secret matters about how decisions are made at government level, which are not available to the public. They're not given to the archives, they're kept in the military operations, including the complete story of the 1965 wars, the 1970 war, 1947 war, and so on. So the first thing was to microfilm all these documents. So I had a section where we were doing the microfilming and putting the documents. Then we required what is known as a computer system, because the computers were just coming out. I'm talking of 1982, right? So we came to know that there's a computer called Honeywell Bull. It's a small computer. Nobody knew anything about computers except the signals. The school in Mao was studying them, and none of the officers in the military operations were able to handle a computer to know what it is all about. Nevertheless, we went into this and made a case We called the Computer Maintenance Corporation, which is a company belonging to government, to explain to us how they can help. It is marvelous because this you have to put all your stuff into the computer. You know what you put in comes out. Unless you put it in, nothing comes out. You have to handle it, top secret documents, this, that, also effective principles that you're following in carrying out any action. And so much to the uh, alarm of officers in the military operations side of this directorate, I got this Honeywell Bull computer put into the basement of the army headquarters. Now, you know what a basement looks like. Horrible, stinking place where all the muck of the old files and things are thrown before some scavenger takes it up. And there are, of course, big rooms with pillars which are holding up the edifice of army headquarters. This is the South Block. So we had no the space. We selected this, and then according to government, we we had to ask the Ministry of Defense's permission to repair this place, clean it up, seal it properly, computerize it with wires and things and all that. Then to fix the Honeywell bulls, certain requirements are required, so that Computer Maintenance Corporation was to do that. Then it had steady air conditioning throughout, because that time the computers required an air conditioning system where the temperature was maintained properly at a particular temperature, 70 Fahrenheit or whatever it was. For that, we wanted to seal the place completely, do it up nicely, so enough space was there for clerical work and for desks and for the wiring of the computer itself and the outlets that were to be used. So there were three organizations involved, according to government orders. We have to give a separate contract to the PWD to do up this job, separate contract to the computer people to establish the computer, a separate contract for the air conditioning people to do the air conditioning. If you did that to three different organizations, the price was, according to government stipulations, maybe about 30% less than if only one man did it. So when I was talking to the CMC, that's the Computer Maintenance Corporation people, they said, look here, we will guarantee you, because I wanted a 5 years guarantee for this computer. They said, we will guarantee you the computer provided we're in charge of everything. That means the repair of this place, the building of these rooms, the sealing of these rooms, and the air conditioning of these rooms must be done by us. Then we are responsible. But if somebody else is doing the air conditioning and it fails, and the computer goes for the six, we can't be blamed. So I thought that logical. And the answer was now to, for the first time in history, get Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Finance sanction to pay 30% more or less extra that would be required for a single person to do the job. Of course, it went into a few crores, the whole thing. So we made a case, and since I was in a mad hurry, we had to get this done very fast because the contract periods are limited, the prices that are offered. If you wait for a few weeks, then the prices go up. So I made a case, a nice case, and I spoke to the Joint Secretary G, who is a very pleasant gentleman called Nambia. I said, Mr. Nambia, this is coming. I want this sanction. He said, well, you have to send me the papers first. I said, I'm sending the papers. I've got no time. So I'll give you half an hour to study the paper. You sign it. And then it has to go to Defense Secretary. After he signed it, then it has to go to the Finance Secretary in Ministry of Defense, who actually belongs to Ministry of Finance, but is the Defense Finance. And all of them have got very harsh methods of stopping you from spending any money to save the government its funds. So he said, well, you send the thing. So I sent it to him. But I sent it to him. I selected an officer who just joined us from, he was a colonel, lieutenant colonel. He just commanded a battalion, a Gurkha battalion. And just a second. This officer is a very pleasant man. He's not very tall, fair, and he had light eyes, but his eyes were red. Some people are like red eyes. Really grim looking expression on his face. So I sent him there. I said, here is this paper. You stand there in the Joint Secretary's office till he signed it and you bring it back. I can't waste time. So I said, when you enter the office, he didn't even know where the bureaucrat's office was. So I told him to go down that particular passage and number so and so door on the such and such place. Mr. Navia is a very pleasant man, and you'll find piles of files all over his desk and on the floor. You enter, you give a smart salute, and you stand there till he signed it and gets the paper back. Right, sir. He just come from a battalion, so he pays orders. We did that. So after about 20 minutes, Mr. Namdia rang me up. He said, General, this officer you have sent, he's a very smart looking officer. He's got a very angry looking face. So I said, so what's the problem? He said, he won't move out of my office. I've told him, please leave the file here. I've got a lot of work. I'll look at it. But he says, kept standing there. He won't go. So could you please instruct him? I can hand the phone to him. Please instruct him to go. So I said, Namdia, has he got red eyes? He said, yes, he's got red eyes. I said, then he must be a Gurkha. I said, is he carrying a kukri by any chance? So he looked around and all that. Then Gurkhas carry a kukri in their uniform on the right side of the belt. It hangs with a very sharp weapon. He said, no, I don't think he's carrying a kukri. I said, thank you, that's very good because he's less dangerous. But the chaps just come from the battalion and these chaps are fighters. They obey orders. He's been instructed by me to get the sign and come back with the file. So I'm afraid you'll have to sign it quickly. And he said, but look, I've got hundreds of files here. And I'll have to study this case. It will take me half an hour, 45 minutes. Maybe after 3 or 4 days, I'll send it back. I said, Mr. Namja, this Gurkha chap, nobody can control them very much. I suggest to give it a chance. So I said, I'm very sorry. I don't know if I can control this man. The chap kept standing there. Namja told him, Colonel, you can go away. He didn't say anything. He just stood there glaring at it. So now I had to take the file and look through it quickly and sign it, give it back to the officer to relieve him of the presence, the domineering presence of this Gurkha officer. So then he came back, and I used the same technique to send him to the Defense Secretary, who was a senior bureaucrat in charge of the Ministry of Defense. Got it signed. Then I sent it to the Ministry of Finance, same technique, and I got this thing through these 3 gentlemen, Joint Secretary G, Secretary of Defense, and Defense Finance. Normally it would have taken a month, not less than a month or 2 weeks. This was done in 1 day. The moment it was done, I got my sanction, 30% extra expenses. And within the next month, we had the Honeywell board installed. And we managed to train many of our officers how to handle the computer systems after putting the documents in. See? Or many documents are top secret for the eyes only of the officers dealing. So since they had to do it themselves, they had to train. So I sent some of the younger officers to Mao for some 2-3 weeks of training on a computer to manage it. And the general in charge, Tabi Nair, a good friend of mine, he said, I'm damned, I'm not going to give my top secret department to some machine because I don't know how to handle it. And we have to get a signal ensure somebody to handle it. I'm sorry. I said those signal ensures will be cleared by security to handle jobs. For a clerical staff who types documents is also cleared for security. So I think you should have to do it. But since they were very reluctant to do this, I had to go to the boss, that is the DGMO, Director General Military Operations, who was the Lieutenant General, K.K. Hazari. Asked him to push these officers, it has to be done. Because I had briefed the chief on this. And the chief was General Krishna Rao. He said, yes, go ahead and do it. So once I had the clearance of the chief and my boss, the DGMO, one could get this done. This was the method how computerization started in the army. See, so that people had the machine to help in sorting documents and getting the type of information that you wanted at a click of a button. And this Honeywell board functioned very well. Must have got much better systems now. I'm talking of 1982. I got a call from a few days later. I got a call from the foreign ministry because they were also trying to install a Honeywell board to computerize some of their operations. And he said, General, could you tell us how did you manage to get this sanction from your government, from the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Finance in such a short time? Because we've been at it for the last 3 months and we still haven't received the sanction for a single unit to do the thing. So I said, I don't know. I think our government is extremely efficient. Our bureaucracy and our defense secretary, and by God, our finance ministry is on the ball. The moment they understood your problem, they did it in a flash. Compliments to them. I said, you're lucky. I mean, you're unlucky you're in the foreign ministry. Had you been in the Ministry of Defense, you would have been sanctioned in one day. Anyway, so that is an interesting example of getting things done in army headquarters, which I explained takes months and months of filing work, no matter what. Another problem that arose was terrorism. The Sikh terrorism has started. Now, I don't know what you were doing in 1982. I don't know if you recollect. How old were you in 1982? Is that a nasty question?
No, no. I'm born in 65, so I was
Oh,
quite old.
okay, fine.
Hmm.
So you're in a late teens.
Yeah.
In 1982,
Hmm.
there was so much terrorism. I'll give you one or two instances. Buses used to be stopped in Punjab.
Hmm.
Every passenger taken down.
Hmm.
They check out who's a Muslim, who's a Sikh, who's
Yeah.
a Christian, put them back in the buses, line up the Hindus and shoot them dead. This is what we faced 1982, 82, 83 onward. This is the Punjab terrorism. Now, young Sikh boys who couldn't get a job, educated, crossed the border to Pakistan. They were developed as terrorists there and given weapons, given money, sent back to play mayhem. And of course, it's a question of getting a job. It's being paid well. Goes to show to you how important it is to get people working rather than sitting at home doing nothing. And as they say, an idle mind is a devil's workshop. This is the cause. It created a whole lot of problems in India and everywhere else. But those of us in the army and, for instance, the bureaucracy and the politicians understood this is not Sikhs who are doing it. It is that 1% of 0.05% of people who are terrorists who are doing it to create a dissension between Hindus and Sikhs in Punjab. Some of it is still carrying on, with this Khalistan movement, as you may be reading in the papers. And now, before I go further, I must tell you what is the history of the Sikh clan. Guru Nanak Ji, 15th century, was the great leader of the Sikhs. He's a Hindu Brahmin. And when he started this great religion, it's a religion which really combines the wisdom of Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam into beautiful couplets. The Guru Granth Sahib was written much later, by the fifth Guru or something. But Guru Nanak used to speak these verses in blank verse in Gurmukhi, that is in the local language, to explain to people as to how to lead their lives. Very simple instructions, very effective instructions. And so most families in Punjab, they were all Hindu families or Muslim families, many families, including mine, gave the eldest son to become a Sikh. So we are interrelated, one might say. People don't realize that. We are very closely interrelated in Punjab. And look at the result. Despite this murdering of Hindus that I'm describing, there were no riots. The majority of Hindus were mostly in the towns, Amritsar, Jalandhar, Ludhiana, all these places. The majority business people and others were Hindus. And the majority in the villages where you were tilling the soil were Sikhs. But they were interrelated. And thus, because you've got relations, marriage relations, and that sort of thing, no riots took place. But this thing was going on. Now, I understood that, and the Sikhs are a very fine community of this country. And in the military specifically, I think they're some of our best soldiers, and very loyal and extremely good soldiers. And why they're good soldiers is that they don't think of themselves, they only think of their duty. And this is their training. So there were a lot of reverberations in Haryana, especially, amongst the erstwhile, Haryana was part of Punjab before Indira Gandhi divided it to a separate state. And the Haryanvis, therefore, take a very, very dim view of the Punjab side of the territory because lack of water and lack of problems, even earlier when the rule was mostly by the Sikhs in Punjab, of the joint, combined Punjab, the Haryana side of it was left rather blank and undeveloped. So when they were separated, they started developing very well themselves, but they had angst. And one day I was living in E1 because my mother was here, and I used to commute daily to army headquarters. One day in the evening, I got a call that from some of my friends who had retired, brigadiers, colonels, that look, we want to come and see you. So 3 or 4 of them came and met me here, Jats. And I said, what's the problem, right? Long, grim faces. They said, the press is saying that these Sikh terrorists are killing Hindus in the buses. What the hell are you doing about it? So I said, look, these are terrorists. We'll deal with them. It takes time to deal with the terrorists. He's like a fish in the water. You have to catch him. If you catch him, then you can, our judiciary doesn't know how to deal with the terrorists because they themselves are under threat. So they call it encounter crossing and encounter killing. That means you capture a man and kill him. But otherwise, if you take him to court, you have to prove that he's a terrorist. He says, I'm not a terrorist. So all right, how do you do that? So to catch him red-handed, you need witnesses. But naturally, if somebody is doing something nasty, he's not going to get caught red-handed. He does it when nobody else is looking, whether he's murdering or raping or killing spare Hindus or whatever it is. So I said to these chaps, I said, look, don't worry, it will take time because terrorism is terrorism and we have to deal with it slowly, slowly. They said, no, we are very angry. And these Sikhs are out of control. So give us the wink. I said, what do you mean, give us the wink? You give us the wink, we'll start from the border of Punjab right up to the border of Pakistan. We'll kill everyone inside. Everyone. No, they said, no, too late. We got that. I just showing you how the anger of people develops when they hear a piece of news and then they have the agitators amongst them who motivate them to sort of get angry and do something about it because the government is doing nothing. The government is always doing something. It's not that they are not doing anything. These agitators, I think, paid for from local people or from abroad to create the agitation, to create a want to create a problem. So opposition people are involved with this. See? Then now, Indira Gandhi, as I told you earlier, are you hearing me all right? I've got a notice that the internet is unstable. Well, anyway, so Indira Gandhi said that she wanted all states to be Congress. Now, some states were not Congress, and they were agitating against the Prime Minister and the Congress Party. So it's happening today also, it's happening then also. This is the art of politics. which I'm afraid I'm not very wise about, though I do see the wrong end of it, so how it creates dissension amongst your people. I told the church that cool it. You don't have to bother about it, leave it to us. I discussed it in army headquarters with my colleagues and also brought it to the notice of the DGMO and others and the vice chief. So they said, don't worry, we have to cool it. And of course, actions were being taken through police and otherwise there. More of the story later. It takes many years because it started in 82, carried on till it's still carrying on. So by the time I became chief, I did other actions which I'll talk about. This is one aspect. These are very delicate subjects. Then there were a lot of operational exercises being done between Army, Navy, and Air Force, especially in the Andaman and Nicobar. Now, you see, if you look at India's map, the eastern borders of India, really the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Nobody takes much notice of them. The British used them as a jail where all our freedom fighters were shoved. It's known as Kala Pani. Kala Pani means you have to cross the black waters, the Bay of Bengal, and be incarcerated in Andaman and Nicobar Islands and Port Blair. But even at that time, 1982, when there was no threat from China, we did feel that we need to develop some military position here. So there was an Andaman and Nicobar command established, Army, Navy, and Air Force. Number of exercises held between ships and aircraft, and Car Nicobar Island was made into an airfield, an airbase, where the fighters were kept in India, but they could operate from that airbase. And we had a naval establishment with ships at Port Blair and also in Great Nicobar and in between Car Nicobar, other islands. And you had a military battalion first, and then 2 battalions. Now you've got something more. So these island territories are the outposts of India and have to take a lot of exercises that. Now, General Vaidya, I have described him earlier. He got a Mahavir Chakra in the 1965 war and a Mahavir Chakra in the 1971 war as a brigadier. He commanded the armored division when I was the Colonel GS, and I happened to be in exercises with him. He had been my divisional commander, a very fine gentleman, and he had become an army commander in Eastern Command. So he rang me up. He says, come on, these exercises are on. You are sitting in army headquarters doing nothing. There's somebody has to be here for military operations to see how it goes. So you come. I said, all right, I'll have to get sanctions. So I got sanctions from the government and from others to proceed to join this exercise, which I did. Now, this is a very interesting exercise because what we did was that we really went to Port Blair and then we flew to Car Nicobar to examine the facilities there, and there were a lot of exercises going on. One of the parts of the exercises was that we had Navy ships who could carry about 3 or 4 tanks each. That tank, the PT-76, it's a Russian tank. It's got a small gun, but it can swim. So the idea here was that can it swim from the sea after it comes reasonably close to the land, say about 1,000 yards from the land? Can it swim and attack on the ground with support of artillery fire and so on and so forth? And infantry in boats, you know how it is. So this is already done, of course, in World War II. There was a huge cross-English Channel attack by the Allies against Hitler's German occupation of France, landings at Normandy coast of France. So it's a huge thing. But of course, India was just, we didn't have many facilities and we had 2, 3 ships which could do that. We wanted to test them out. So then we decided, General Vaidya told me, come on, we should